brave, but foolish, my old Jedi friend. You're impossibly outnumbered.
I don't think so.
We'll see.
B2 Super Battle Droids, also known as Super Battle Droids or Supers, were introduced shortly before the first Battle of Geonosis at the start of the Clone Wars. These were updated, heavily armoured replacements of the B1s, slotting into the role of heavy infantry. Super Battle Droids were a terrifying sight on the battlefield due to their firepower and how hard they were to kill. Unlike B1s, they didn't suffer from the initial problem of being linked to a command ship. They were built from the ground up to have an internal command system. As a result, they ended up being extremely problematic for the Republic and were also used by the Trade Federation, the Techno Union, and the CIS. Welcome back to this series, which I have decided to call Star Wars Versus. In this series we compare characters from all over Star Wars to find which is the strongest. I mentioned in the last video that I was going off canon and not Legends material. I have already decided not to do that, and I will be using info from Legends for 3 reasons. The first is that Legends has been around since 1977, so it has a long history of lore and stories. The second is that since all Star Wars media before April 2014 has been retconned, I technically grew up with Legends, playing games like the original Battlefronts, so Legends is pretty dear to my heart. The final reason is that more people are familiar with and probably prefer Legends to the canon, so I feel like using Legends would appeal to more people. So after all that waffle, let's get into the video. Super Battle Droids were far more powerful than their B1 buddies. Their armour was made from geranium and frick, both of which were resistant to lightsabers. It was also thicker than the B1 armour, encasing the processor unit and signal responder, making it much harder to destroy those parts. They were also able to lift a clone trooper into the air. This made them very hard for the Republic to deal with, even with their DC series of blasters that were excellent for taking down B1s. You might consider this cheating, but I've decided to put their modularity in this section, which I think is the core strength of the B2. While the B1s were used for lots of different jobs, they pretty much only had one version for fighting. However, the B2s were able to swap out arms and weapons to suit whatever role was needed. I'll talk more about their weapons later, but this modularity was a big upgrade to the Super Battle Droids. However, their legs were still fairly thin, so knocking them over, while it was hard, would make it difficult for them to get back up and make them an easy target for heavier weapons. This gives them a rating of 3. Much like the B1s, B2s were capable of running, often sprinting into battle while holding their wrist blasters out. This was unsurprisingly a very frightening idea, as B2s were essentially walking tanks. However, much like the B1s, they didn't run much. Instead, they relied more on slow approaches, which were actually surprisingly effective at breaking morale. I'm going to give them a rating of 1, as while they could run like B1s, they were a lot heavier, so they moved slower even at running speed. If the B1s weren't agile, then the B2s were even less agile. Their bulky frames made it hard for them to do anything more than walk or run. They were also a lot taller, which didn't play to their advantages in enclosed spaces. Instead, they were often used on bigger fighting arenas or placed as guards on the outside of ships, while other battle droids like the B1s defended inside. This might not be the case for jump and rocket B2s, who were fitted with jetpacks, but I'm only looking at the standard unit for now, so therefore they get a rating of 1. As I've mentioned before, the armour of the B2s was really durable, able to withstand lightsabers and blasters. As a result, they were used as heavy infantry, providing both good attack and defense in one package. Something I love about these droids is the torso and neck design. Rather than having a neck above the body, the head was placed pretty much in the upper chest area. This removed the problem B1s had, where their vital processing units were easily damaged by targeting their thin neck, and instead their head was a lot harder to remove. Firstly, soldiers had to be face to face with these droids, which isn't something you would want to do, and then concentrate fire to get through the armour. This simple design change improved the lifespan of the B2 units. A major advantage of the B2s was their wide array of weaponry. They had wrist-mounted blasters, which were both a good primary and last resort weapon. This removed the need for manufacturing extra weapons, as these wrist blasters were as powerful as full-size blaster rifles, so this scrapped the need for the E5 for these units. They were also linked to signal emitters built into the hand, so it was almost impossible for this weapon to misfire and malfunction. Technically, they were able to use weaponry, but due to their wide hands, they had trouble with smaller blasters. However, they didn't really need to use them, as their modular system system allowed them to replace their arms with numerous weapons, such as the rocket launcher used by the B2HA units. Their blaster could also be changed to a tri-shot system, giving them a wrist-mounted shotgun blaster. This versatility in weaponry is what makes them a cut above the other battle droids. As heavy infantry, they were able to dish out ridiculous amounts of damage. However, I do have a problem with their standard issue weapons. For example, while the blasters were fully powered rifles, they could only be pointed in the direction of the arm was facing, and the arm had limited movement. This is obviously worse than having an external rifle which could be pointed in pretty much any direction quickly. They also didn't have the range of long rifles like the DC-15A of the Republic. This means that given the scale and size of battles during the Clone Wars, they had to rely on other units to provide firepower at longer ranges. However, they were still very powerful and tough opponents, so I have to give them a 3. The B2s were surprisingly less intelligent than the B1 units. While they could operate on their own, they would often forget enemies who moved out of their line of sight, so they were best used with a commander of some sort. They were also temperamental, knocking down allies who were in the way of them when fighting, and while they could speak like the B1s, their grammar was a lot worse. B2s were basically big, dumb punching bags for the separatists, so it's not surprising they get a 1. Overall, the B2s get a rating of 1.8, only 0.2 points ahead of the B1s. I was actually quite surprised at this. I prefer the B2s over the B1s quite a lot, and before my research, I would have thought that they would have scored higher. Despite scoring more in strength and defense, they lost points in speed. However, if I had the credits, I would much rather an army of B2s than B1s. But anyway guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully, I'll see you next time.